GamingBolt presents 15 most awful-looking video game consoles of all time.
We have a lot to talk about, so without wasting your time, let us begin right away.
Mattel Hyperscan. This little-known console is also one of the ugliest. It was a system designed for children in which you'd scan cards with RF chips in them, kind of like Nintendo's Amiibo. The system looks like a PS2 that's been cut in half and reattached with a hinge in the middle. One side has a big red disc where you scan your cards, then you have to fold it in at a 90-degree angle to play. It didn't work well, and its poor sales reflect that. Worlds of Wonder Action Max. The Worlds of Wonder Action Max is a hell of a console. Believe it or not, it actually requires you to hook it up to a VCR to play. And the games come on VHS tapes. Since you probably never heard of this thing, you can imagine how well that did. The console itself looks like an ugly gray box with a white stripe down the front. What makes this one so ugly is that you have to attach a red light sensor to your TV just so you can use the light gun. Tiger R-Zone. The Tiger R-Zone was the follow-up to the crappy Tiger handheld electronic games. This was a full-feature gaming console made to compete directly with the Virtual Boy. Yes, really, the Virtual Boy. It came in two vomit-inducing models, one which strapped to your head with a screen over one eye, the other was the standard handheld device, but had a mirror on the back. The cartridges had clear windows on them which showed the graphics and the mirror where you would play the game. NOKIA N-GAGE. The N-GAGE was one of the first handheld gaming consoles that tried to be more than just a gaming console. It was primarily a phone that also played cartridge-based games. The problem was that the speaker and the microphone were on the top, so the whole console would stick out of the side of your head if you tried to use the thing as a phone. Not to mention, the number keys that double as buttons were uncomfortable and got in the way. Apple PIPPIN. Apple's first and only attempt at a dedicated games console was a huge flop. It looked like Apple tried to make it look like a computer, but didn't know how to also not make it dull. It was a multimedia device that let you listen to music, but the buttons to control playback were on top of the console itself, not the controller. Speaking of the controller, it's even uglier than the console. It has an uncomfortable boomerang shape, a trackball in the middle, and a disc-shaped D-pad that makes the 360 D-pad look like the best thing ever made. COLECO TELSTAR Arcade. The COLECO TELSTAR Arcade was an early attempt at a home gaming console, and you can tell. It was a hideous amalgamation of a light gun, steering wheel, and control knobs all built directly into the console itself. It had a triangular shape decked out with that 70s classic wood grain. The cartridges were triangle as well, and you had to plug them flat into the top of the system, which made them difficult to take back out. Ouya. The Ouya was a terrible system with a terrible aesthetic. It had a cube-shaped design with an ugly gray color scheme. It was small and light as well, but it was so light that if you plugged in a particularly thick HDMI cord in the back, the console itself would lift up and tilt forward. On top of all that, it was super cheap as well, to the point where you felt like you were going to shatter the console every time you pressed the power button. There's not much else to say about the Ouya's design because it's so minimal, so plain, and so lifeless. 3DO Interactive Multiplayer. The 3DO was originally being made by Electronic Arts, but when they scrapped the console, the guy in charge of the project took it over and made his own company. What made the 3DO special is that no company manufactured it. It was licensed out to 3 different companies, each making their own models. There was a Sanyo version that sold in Japan that had a disc tray out in front that made it look like a VCR. The Gold Star version looked like a VCR with a strange gray circle in the middle of it. Panasonic made 2 versions, one that looked like the Philips version and one that takes the cake for the ugliest model. It looked like a VCR but had weird column-like supports on all 4 corners. Atari Jaguar. The Atari Jaguar was the last console made by Atari, and unlike Sega with their Dreamcast, it wasn't a glorious swan song. The Jaguar had a weird recessed design which was supposed to house the Jaguar CD add-on, which made the system look like a toilet. The controller had a bizarre number pad on it that didn't do anything. The design may look familiar to you as once Atari stopped producing the console, they sold their outer housing to a dental company to use as X-rays. Philips CDI. Similar to the 3DO, Philips hired another company to help produce another version. The Philips-made version also looked like a VCR with its big, bulky design and weird LCD panel on the front. The controller for it was the cheapest thing in the world, just a hunk of plastic barely shaped like a controller with some buttons and a D-pad on it, no paint, emblems, or anything. The second version was made by Magnavox, this one resembling the Panasonic version of the 3DO with a small design, but with really tall legs for some reason. Atari 5200. The Atari 5200 was a massive, unwieldy beast. For some reason, it had a tray on the back that didn't fit the controller or its games. The controller was terrible, featuring a bizarre joystick/analog stick hybrid that was unresponsive, and a numeric keypad like the Jaguar. The unit was all black with a gray strip in the middle, which was dull. For some reason, it slopped up towards the back as well. Virtual Boy. The Virtual Boy is one of the worst consoles ever. It was meant to be a virtual reality system, but instead only played games in bad 3D close to your face. Because it was supposed to be VR, it was a set of goggles, but for some reason there was no head strap. Instead, the unit was stuck on a pair of stilts that you had to twist your head into. The whole thing was bright red, which reflected how the game displayed color. Amiga CD32. The Amiga CD32 was Commodore's attempt of breaking away from computer gaming and into the console market. The console sold poorly because it had gone up against the PS1 and the Nintendo 64. The console had a grill grate on one side and clear CD door on the other. It also came with a built-in headphone jack and volume slider, but it was on the console instead of the controller. The controller was shaped like a U with a terrible disc for a D-pad. Pioneer LASERACTIVE. The LASERACTIVE was Pioneer's attempt at going up against the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. Needless to say, it failed. What makes this particular console so ugly is its sheer size. It was massive, like a multi-floor building compared to the other gaming consoles. It was super tall, but still wide like a giant record player. That's what it looked like as well, with a panel on the front that housed the disc eject, a power button, and music control buttons too. Oddly, Pioneer partnered up with Sega to release a module that let you play Sega CD games on it, which only increased its size. Tiger Gizmondo. Swedish company Tiger Telematics released the Gizmondo as a rival to the Game Boy Advanced SP in 2004. It came in a weird shape and had circular trigger buttons on top, as well as a play, stop, reverse, and forward buttons for face buttons. Like other terrible consoles, the D-pad featured a disc shape that was almost unusable.
And that wraps it up. What are your thoughts about this? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and share it on Twitter and Facebook. And why not consider subscribing? We upload some really cool videos almost every day. Thank you for watching this video, and happy gaming!